like to welcome everybody to today's workshop, Taking Your Data Science Live. We're going to be talking about the different options that you'd have to take your data science solution and to present it to the world in an interactive, primarily interactive web page. There are a number of solutions to this, and the number is growing. Everything from open source solutions that you host yourself to much more a professional full service. We'll be concentrating primarily on two solutions, talking quite a bit about Streamlit, which is for Python data science solutions. We'll also be talking a bit about Shiny, and then we'll be mentioning just a few at the very end. And at the very end, we're also going to be interested in hearing from you, what you would like to share. Would like to hear about any approaches that other people have tried. And if you want to start thinking about it now, I'm going to be asking you to share the ideas that you have for sharing your research, and then we'll actually talk through what possible solutions might be appropriate for you. So without further ado, though, we'll start out with Dr. Bell, who will begin by sharing her story of how she began to share her data science work.
Share my screen here. All right. Can everyone see this slide? Once upon a time, I'm going to tell you a story. So before we just directly jump into Streamlit, I wanted to tell you a story about an interactive GUI that I developed. And so, by the way, you're going to hear us use the phrase GUI a lot and also UI a lot. So these are the words for graphical user interface, so GUI. So it's something that's not by the command line. It's basically an application that has button sliders, whatever, to interact with the underlying data or underlying framework. So for the project that I'll share today that I did, I will say this GUI is a lot less sharing data science work and a lot more of coordinating roles, deadlines, and tasks for data science events. But the underlying motivation and the underlying development is still there. So the goal is to be able to share this work and collaborate with others, or at least just share with others and impart some sort of knowledge based on the data and interaction. So let's see, what were my constraints and objectives for this task? So first, I wanted to be able to provide the desired functionality. So obviously I wanted to do the thing which I had set out to do. Also, I wanted to allow controls for everyone to use. I wanted them to be pretty intuitive, particularly for non-technical people. I also wanted it to be pretty aesthetically pleasing. So things that kind of look pretty nice or look good, make people feel comfortable interacting with them a little bit more. And it encourages, or at least doesn't discourage people from using the application. I also needed to be able to deploy this application in the sense that somehow the end users are going to have to use this app that I'm developing. And also for my situation, I also had to make it pretty quick. So we had to use this very quickly from when it was created. I think I had about less than a week for that one. So let's see, how did I implement this? Wow, as you guys well know if you've been in our workshops, first, created a repo. That's what I'm going to do. If anything comes down to it, create the repo first. I decided that would be what I would use to version and hold all the functionality. I ended up developing in Jupyter Notebooks, and everything that was just base functionality, I just made it callable. By the way, when I started developing, I had come from using Microsoft Visual Studio, so MFC, to make my GUIs in MATLAB. And so, if you want things to have things that execute, you use those kind of frameworks, and they have those tools available to be able to do that. And so that kind of development and making like callable functions and things like that, that was already at the forefront of my mind. So then I had to decide, so I'm in Python. Like, how am I going to actually implement the GUI part? So I implemented the functionality. How do I do the interactivity part? So I think around the time that I was developing this GUI, Streamlit had just been announced. And so I think I didn't really know enough about it to try it. And of course, I'm like, okay, well, I'm coming from the frameworks of MFC, everything is pretty much going to be the same. Whether I was sure or not, it was not. That's okay. So you know what I did kind of know about or was familiar with how things looked? It was IPy widgets, which sounds so crazy, but it's this package that allows you to run GUIs actually in your Jupyter Notebook. So they're little quick widgets that you can just pop in the notebooks, and deploy interactively in a Jupyter Notebook. And better yet, they sat right in that MFC or Android UI MATLAB framework that I was used to. So I coded up this GUI, which had the traditional setup. I defined the elements that I wanted, how they would look, and whenever you click a button or interact with them, you read the value from that object. So it wasn't that fast, but I was kind of used to doing it. So then I got to that last piece of, well, how am I going to distribute and execute this? There are some options that I had, and I was like, okay, well, I think I'm going to bundle all of this up as an executable script. But then at that time, we had these cross-platform issues. I was on Windows, other people were on Mac. We had other challenges. At the same time, I wasn't quite sure about how Google authentication worked. And so I just decided we're just going to give people instructions on how to install this. Like, we're at the Data Science Institute. Everyone here is at the Data Science Institute that I was working with. I was like, we are just going to install this like normal. One challenge with that was that some of the people that we were working with were non-technical users, but I said, you know, I just give them the instructions and they'll be able to follow it. It's perfect, no problem. Then I said, you know, it's just Anaconda. All you do is just, you know, install it and then run it, and then everything is fine. So let's take a moment and just quickly see what that looks like. Let's see, let me just pop over there right quick. Change screens just a moment here. All right here. Sometimes it can be so hard just to find the thing that you're looking for. All right, there, that should do it. All right, so we had my Jupyter Notebook here that I had developed. Just ignore that secret key that I'm not supposed to put in repos, but I did it anyways. So here we can see that this is the actual functionality that I had. So this is what I would pretty much have anyway. These are things that I had to do to make the actual work of the back end. So the task that I needed to do for analysis and for data science projects, this is going to be things like loading the model, getting your data into the form that you need it, and then things like that. So then I actually had to define what the GUI looked like. So that would be this Python script. And as you can see here, there's some different things that I had to do. So first, I had to describe all the different widgets and kind of, you know, name them. Obviously, I had to define all the layouts, all that good stuff. Then I had to define what would happen. Something that I do want to point out here is that you can see that we use the actual object and we always have to extract its value. So for example, if you have something like a radio button, like you would have to say, okay, this radio button, and when it's clicked, like you have to extract the value to go and use that. Also, as normal, you define callback functions. Lastly, I kind of just packaged this up so it will be something kind of easy to use because again, we were with non-technical audiences. And so my thought was, okay, the easier it looks, the simpler it looks, the more people will be likely to use that. So that was a good thought in my mind. So let's see, how did this actually look? So this is the Jupyter Notebook. So I gave people, you know, some instructions here about what to do. And then I just told them, you just click this button and then hopefully it'll run. Hopefully this will run today. We'll see. I've been making a lot of function calls to Google, and so it might just choose to ignore us this time. So this is the UI that we made. So we're able to just kind of interact with it, see maybe what our own assignments are, and then pull that up like so. Oh, we'll see the like so in just a moment here. And hopefully we'll see if I have it. And so you see things like this. So I thought that was a pretty nice UI. I got kind of to the point. There was a lot of code here that kind of had to make it work, but you know, some of it you'd have to write anyways. And then I said, you know what? Let's give people the instructions. So I sent people the instructions and I said, here's the repo. The README has all the instructions that you need. So I'm sure they got the link and they went and looked and they were like, okay, let's see what I have to do. All right, setup. That looks like a lot of instructions. Ooh, look, I have to, oh, this is really, wow. That's a lot of things to do. And so I'm sure people were like, okay, well, I'll maybe do that one day. So this is pretty long. That's a lot of instructions. Those are a lot of words. So let's see how that went. Let's just think about that, even in our own lives, how we feel about very long instructions. So let's just find the presentation again. Sorry about that. Let's see. All right. So let's see. All right. So as I told you before, I made the GUI. Quick question for you, and you can just drop this directly in the chat. How many people do you think use that? So it's a really nice UI, but they would have never actually seen the UI because I sent them the instructions on how to install the UI. So I think there are about 10 of us. We'll just make it 10. We'll call it 10. How many people do you think actually did all the instructions and decided to install this? And you can just drop a number in the chat. Okay, 2 between 0 and 1. Okay, including me. So 2, 1. Okay. Yeah. I love that. Yeah, I love that. Yes. You all are very, very generous and kind in wanting to do all of those instructions. So other than me and Jesse, it was a grand total of absolutely no one. No, that's it, nobody. So our non-technical users looked at that full page and read it, and they were like, that's not anything that's happening for me. That's nothing I intend to do. And so they just quite plainly did not do it. And so what they did is they were like, instead of that list of things was so hard to do, they were like, we're just gonna go ahead and use directly the Google Sheets. I'm just gonna do that directly. All right, I think my slides are a little bit out of order, but let's go on. Okay, yep, 0. Hurtful. I even put that in there twice for myself to hurt my feelings doubly. All right, so tell me again, why do you think that people didn't use it? And you can just drop that again in the chat. Yes, exactly. It was yes, thank you. Man, you guys have some good synonyms from ridiculously difficult to install, intimidating, high energy activation barrier, all facts. Yes, so it was very hard for the user to install it. Secondly, the development was actually non-trivial for me. Like, I happened to benefit because I had done UI work in the past with MFC or MATLAB. And at the time, those were considered to be the accelerated method of development because you didn't have to write a lot of the underlying things. But if I would have not had the experience with those interfaces, I would have absolutely struggled. I did make it within my week allotment, but it was not overly easy. Again, the code was just really challenging. And also, it's really unfortunate when the development of the GUI is really not the central focus. So what I did was not a very strong modeling and analysis effort. Just consider, like, if you're a data scientist, or you're a researcher, or you're a graduate student, if you're faculty, your goal is to disseminate your work. Your training is in your methodology, in your domain. It's in the tooling for your work. It's not in the tooling for making these complex GUIs. We just want to make models. We want to share them. We want to spread our knowledge, but we don't want to spend a million years just trying to figure out how you implement a GUI. Like, we're not trying to learn new frameworks. We're trying to disseminate our knowledge. And for that matter, how we deploy it. So there's so many different ways to deploy things. You can do with Doc, or there's just so many different ways. And even that can really be a challenge, just to figure out how to make your work available for other people to interact with. Exactly. There are a lot of other ways that we can do this specifically in Python, and we'll share a little bit more about that one now. So as you guys probably well know, we're going to be talking about Streamlit as well as Shiny a little bit later on. And obviously, this is going to be one of the packages that can help us. So if you want to, you can sidle on over to this website, and we can look together about some things that Streamlit is able to do for us, and why it might be a great way to share your data science projects without heavy time and effort investment in understanding how you implement a UI. Okay, so let's see. So this is the address, if anyone wants to just drop that in the chat, just so people can click it real quick. All right. I will go ahead and reshare my screen again. So just quickly talk through that. All right, moving right along. All right, so Streamlit. So you can already see what they're getting at. They are really looking for ways that people can build and share apps really, really quickly. They're advertising minutes here. It does tend to be a lot quicker, and let's see a little bit why. Well, we can just look and scroll down and see why that is. It's a really quick install, even if you had to do that deployment like we were talking about before in like sending people instructions. They're also really about making things a lot simpler. So their API tends to be a little bit easier. For example, we talked about how things are actually like I had to make objects and then extract the value. That's not actually something that you do with Streamlit. So let's see what that's about. So this is something that's really cool. As you can see here, the slider actually results in the number, and this is what you would use in the future. Their API, as you can see here, it has a lot of different interactive features without you having to write a lot of the back-end things. So you can see you have a file uploader. That would actually be really, really challenging to implement. You have things like radio buttons, just picking, charts. That would also be really hard to implement. So if you don't want to, you don't have to define a lot of HTTPS like request handling or HTML or learn CSS to try to define every single one of your elements. And for me, I find it really annoying and an impediment to progress to have to learn or brush off a new language or syntax like CSS or HTML just to implement and share my work. So these are some of the things that just come right out of the box, which are so amazing. Let's see. Let's take a look at some other things that they have. So they say magically simple API. It's pretty exciting. And I think we can go and take a little bit more look at the API. So I really love a good reference guide. If you know anything about me, I love great documentation. I came from the programming days where documentation was not the most important thing when one was deploying these packages for other people to work with. So one had to figure out things on their own. So great documentation is really one of my favorite things. And you can see a lot of the different behaviors that they've already made for you. So again, there's things like charts, there are media, you have like images, audio, video. You can show code, display markdown like I showed with the Jupyter notebooks, and other elements which really allow you to focus on your analysis and the sharing of the work rather than the implementation. So lastly, the part where I really stumbled and fell at was the deployment aspect. And so something that's really cool about Streamlit is they allow you to deploy pretty easily. So once you created your app, let's see, we didn't make it down there. Okay. Once you created your app, they allow you to deploy that app so long as it's on a public GitHub repo once you have the Streamlit sharing account. So the simplest way is to deploy their apps using their own hosting, but you can also do a little bit of private hosting through their Teams paid account. I think the Teams paid account would have been the best solution for us to be able to work internally on this app, but I didn't make that choice at that time. Lastly, it's always available to you to be able to host your Streamlit app on your own servers, and there are some great contributions made from users describing how to do that. So as normal, there are some caveats because there's no free lunch. Right now, sharing, so deploying by Streamlit is currently invite only. So you request an invite and they're just trying to manage their server usage a bit. But once you're invited to having a sharing account, if your app also doesn't have traffic for about 7 consecutive days, they'll put your app to sleep. And that is only minorly a big deal. You'll be notified. And users that visit your site are able to wake it up. But of course, they're trying to conserve their resources while they're growing. There are some additional resource limits in terms of computation. So you're allotted 1 CPU, 800 megs of RAM, and 800 megs of storage. However, if you have something or an app that's really important for the public good, so something like when COVID started and we were trying to understand like the spread and predict it, something like that that's really important for social good, you can contact Streamlit and they may allocate you additional resources. Additionally, some things are managed by the community. So the user community, as I said before.
No, get down.
Sorry.
Get.
Oh, so some things are managed by the user community as opposed to Streamlit themselves. So as I said before, like the deployment on your own private hosted server, those are contributed by the community. And so, you never know how those might go. But also Streamlit is pretty stable and well established. And of course, they're always adding new features to their development. All right, well, Streamlit also has a lot of tutorials that you can look through, which I find to be pretty exciting. And you can see if they have the tools that you need in order to generate the interactivity for you to share your work. But we have one of our students here today, Mubarak Ganyu, and he was a summer research student for the DSI. And he has developed an app using Streamlit. So he'll be starting our data science master's program in the fall. And he's going to share the app that he's developed using Streamlit and tell you a little bit more about his experience with the package. Mubarak, thank you so much for joining us today. And please feel free to expand.
Yeah, thank you very much for inviting me. So I'll be sharing my screen right now to show you. I can't really share my screen. Okay, no. Yeah, so over the summer, I was working on a project with the Data Science Institute to predict the performance of soccer players in England. So I built everything else on using the regular Jupyter Notebook approach. I used the cells to extract data and learn more about the data and eventually create a predictive model. But I was trying to figure out a way in which I could easily build a website in which people could easily go on the website and insert, let's say, the players' attributes so they could get some sort of predicted answer about their performance. So I started off by extracting the data and doing everything I was supposed to do. As Dr. Bell said earlier about Streamlit and how easy it is to create the interface, I proceeded to create the interface using the Streamlit objects, and I started off by creating the title, the header, and everything else like that. And I figured out the way in which I could get the people who are going to be using the website to insert values into different attributes such as goal scored, assist, minutes played, and everything else. And I eventually figured out a way in which the user could click on a button to get the output of the predicted performance. And after doing all this, all I have to do now is just run a command down here called Streamlit run and FPL underscore. So what normally happens is that after you click Streamlit run, all you need is the name of the file, the Python file.py, and you click enter. And it takes you to a website. Can everybody see the website?
Can't see the website yet. It's still sharing your Visual Studio.
Yeah, I'll share the website too now. Let me share the website. So this is the website that I created. So I went from just, having the backend with all those instructions and with all those codes and everything there to having the website. And people can actually use it to predict players' performance. So let's say you have a player, let's just use any name, let's say Bruno Fernandes, for instance. And maybe he scored 16 goals. He has 10 assists. He's played about 2,400 minutes. He's played, let's say 30 games. And he has like, let's say 10 clean sheets. And his position index is, let's say 4 based on the instructions. And he has maybe FPL points from the previous season was about 270. No, yeah, 270, let's say 270. You can go ahead and calculate his predicted performance, which is the FPL points per game. So according to the predictive model, his FPL points per game is 7.09. So as you can see, all you have to do is just like insert the information and you can get the answer. So what I did was I went from, creating a backend in which, as Cheryl said, in which all the codes are there one by one, and you can actually just follow instructions on creating the image, on creating the title, and everything else. And there is a website I found, another website. Can you see that now? Yeah. So this website has a lot of instructions on how to use Streamlit as well, and it provides more information about what you want to do with each instruction or each rather parameter, like maybe you want to like create a text, or you want to create a checkbox, or you want to write something somewhere on the web page, or you're trying to create a title for a different section of the web on the web page. You are trying to create a chart or something like that. So it's a very easy approach. It's a very easy platform to use because of it's easier for people who haven't learned how to like code using HTML and other platforms like build web applications, to just go ahead and straightforward and use this website straightforward. I mean, use Streamlit straightforward to like build their own website. So I think it's very useful and it's not that stressful at all to use.
Excellent, thank you. Let's open this up for a few questions from Mubarak too. I have a few. So when you first hosted it, did you host this using Streamlit IO, or did you do something else?
What I did was I read an article on Medium. So when I was working on the project, I contacted you, I remember, and you told me about Streamlit. So I did some research on my own, and I read an article on Medium, and the article gave me some instructions on how to host a Streamlit website. And I believe I didn't use Streamlit.io. I think I just...
Did you use Heroku? I thought you used Heroku.
Yeah, I used Heroku. Yeah, I used Heroku. Yeah. So what I did was I used the regular Visual Studio Code, the regular platform, to like build everything from scratch. And I got to test it out on a local host website. Then I used Heroku to finally deploy it. So I can also share that one as well, the document that I used to like gather everything else from Heroku. I'll quickly share that one.
Great.
Mm-hmm. So Heroku is a very so normally when you do what I just did on Visual Studio Code, you just get to like build a temporary web server. If you want it to be if you want to create a permanent website, I think you can definitely use Heroku. All you have to do is like create an account and sign up or log in. I'm just gonna go ahead and log in. Yeah, so this was the article I found on Medium that assisted me with like running my first Streamlit app. And I think I also learned about Heroku through the website, through the article. So it talks about, no, this is different. Yeah, so it's the same one, sorry. So it's like just gives you instructions on creating the file through Visual Studio Code. Then talks about hosting it on Heroku as well. And it talks about how you have to get the right files, and I create them on GitHub. And there are like 3 important files: the requirements.txt, the setup.sh, and the proc file. So you have to create those 3 files and insert them on GitHub. So this is my regular GitHub folder. And as you can see, I have the requirements.txt, the setup.sh, and I'm pretty sure I have the proc file somewhere, and I have the proc file right here. When you create these files, you have to ensure that you use the right credentials as well, so that you don't. You have to ensure that you are running the right commands as well, so that it doesn't make any mistake. And after I've done all that, all I have to do next is to go on Heroku and connect, let's say, Heroku to my GitHub file, which is what I did. I connected it to connected it to my GitHub account. Then I looked for the file I wanted to like use, which was I connected it to my GitHub account, and I went into the folder, the directory that I was like targeting, which was the one in which that contained all the folders: the proc file, the requirements file, the setup.sh file, as well as the fpl.spread file that I created using Pi. And after you click on connect, after you connect it to this file, you get to like create the website. You get to host the website, and this is like the final website. So I no longer need to go on Visual Studio Code and run all those codes all over again. I run Streamlit run.fpl.spread of the fpl_spread.py. All I have to do is just let's say open a website like this one, for instance.
Oh, and there's a question, Mark. Was Heroku free for you as well?
Yeah, Heroku was free. Heroku was free.
Mm-hmm.
And as I said earlier, it's quite straightforward. Just make sure you have all the documents on your GitHub folder. So once you connect Heroku to that GitHub folder, it's going to like look for the right documents by itself. So you don't need to run any extra codes. It's just going to look for the right documents, and you have to make sure the documents also have the right commands inside them. So I'll definitely go ahead and I can insert the document into the chart. I mean, the link to the articles inside the chart. So this is just the permanent website. I no longer need to like go back to Visual Code to like run everything again from scratch. Yeah.
How long did it take you to actually get your after you sort of got your coding finished up for the Streamlit? How long did it take you actually to deploy using Heroku?
I'd say it shouldn't take up to 10 minutes.
Okay.
Subtracting the time it took me to like create the account and everything else, because you have to create the account as a first-time user and do a bunch of other things, right? But the regular process shouldn't take up to 10 minutes. The moment you connect to your GitHub folder, I think it just starts by itself, and it looks for the documents, it verifies that everything is in place, and it goes ahead and starts. It does its own thing, and it's just like extracting data and extracting everything, and it just goes ahead and like build the website for you, and you can check out the website. And as I did, I just bookmarked it so I wouldn't forget the link to the website. So if I was presenting this project to anybody and they wanted to learn more about it, I can just send them this link and they can test it out and see.
Excellent. Other questions? Other questions from Mubarak?
So I don't have a question, but I wanted to say that this is so cool. And I love the work that you've done in terms of even having it so the public can interact with your model. I think that's so cool. And also I'm a little jealous because it took me days to get that iPi widgets going. So this looks like a really, really great way in order to accelerate the workflow and share your work. So excellent job.
Thank you.
Great. Other questions? So there's a question from Mark. Go ahead.
I think someone said about the data. I think from the regular code, from the regular Visual Studio Code webs, are you trying to talk about inserting the data into the code on the back end so you can see it on the front end, or are you talking about inserting the data so you can use it to build a model, or what? When you say when the database is needed in it.
So Mark, I'll see if I can rephrase. So let's say that you actually have like a large database that you need to interact with. how do you handle that? And that's actually a really good question. And that's one of the differentiators that you have to keep in mind when you're choosing how to host and what kind of platform to use. So Streamlit is very much, and also Shiny are very much data science centric and dashboard centric. So they're really great when you have a predictive model, but the data that you're reading in that you need to have for that either comes directly through that API, so people are entering it, or you can actually include them in that subdirectory with it. So it's flat files that you might read during setup or something along those lines. But when you need to actually interact with a larger backend, then you have to start thinking about maybe going outside of the open source solutions or going to more paid solutions. So for example, Dash by Plotly is more difficult. It's not as turnkey. So you saw how Mubarak was able to say st.title, so that was really handling so much more behind the scenes, not having to worry about actions. Sharo, you mentioned this, not having to worry about tying these things together. It actually just returns the value. And you don't have to worry about actions or anything like that. It just handles that all for you. But what it doesn't do as good a job with is that database backend and anything that you might want to do that has to do more with the engineering of the backend. And so there are other platforms like Dash by Plotly, which is where it's more difficult to get everything set up. Not everything is turnkey, but it also interacts well and is set up for you to sort of do your own development to make your own ODBC connections to a database along those lines. So it's a bit more explicit and it's more designed for creating an entire website rather than a page or a series of pages whose purpose it is to deliver a data science predictive model. Great, other questions? Oh, and there was a question about Shiny. Yes, and we're going to be talking about that in just a moment as well. So in terms of deploying, you can deploy a Streamlit app pretty much wherever you can run a Python app. But if you're not doing it on one of the hosted solutions like Streamlit.io, which is the simplest, Streamlit.io, everything is set for you. If you can get an invite, they still haven't opened it up. Or Heroku, where you have sort of good instructions and you have to add a few additional parameter files and the like to sort of make it clear how you want to have it run there. If you want to run this on like AWS and roll your own or serve it on your own server, then you have to handle the things having to do with opening up the ports, with serving up the web page. And you can do that. It's open source, you can do that. It's a matter of how much effort you want to put in. The other thing that these hosted solutions can offer, especially for the paid level accounts, is scaling. So for example, if you think that you might have several dozen people interacting with your app at the same time, or hundreds, or you start with dozens, but now you have to go up to hundreds or more. Now you want to be on a hosted environment that will do that scaling for you automatically, so that even if a bunch of people hit it all at one time, it stays up and it still is able to serve. That's what the paid accounts give you, the free accounts don't give you. Can't we not connect Jupyter Notebook to the SQL database using SQLite and these Streamlit? Yeah, you can. Yeah, you can. Absolutely. So anything you can do in Python, you can do, but just know that other solutions have predefined, they'll have predefined connectors, and they'll have easier ways of exposing that information directly from the database than you would find in Streamlit. You've never tried it, but just talking out loud. No, but you're right. Whatever you can do in Python, you can do in a Streamlit app. It's just a matter of how easy it is to actually then expose that information. Great. Other questions? All right, then let's just take a tour of Shiny. Shiny has been around the longest of all of these, actually. It's first started development around 2011, I think. And so it uses an older framework, but one that's been kept up. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you some of the documentation and applications for it. If you are in R, then Shiny is your way. So if you're in R, Shiny is going to be your way to share in the simplest possible way. But there are a couple of things that you do want to keep in mind when you are looking at Shiny. But let's go and let's take a look first at what sort of documentation is available to you for creating your Shiny app. So as Sharo has said, I'm the same way. I love good tutorials. And the tutorials for Shiny are great. So you have video tutorials that take you all the way through. You also have written tutorials that can take you all the way through. And there is a little bit of a lift from your very basic R that you would be coding to get up to a Shiny app. And I would say that there's more of a lift there than there is in the lift to Streamlit. I'm really impressed by Streamlit by how little you have to add in order to get to an interactive app. Here, this is sort of where the age is showing a little bit. So you actually have to go, and you'll notice that they're talking about reactive output. So that means that there's actually a loop in there where it's looking for output, and you actually have to service that and decide what you're going to be doing. So these are actually signals that are being sent, so that you then have to respond to. So you have to learn about things like reactive expression. So there are more concepts that you have to pick up here than you do in Streamlit. On the other side, that also means that you can get some nice control. A lot of the work around Shiny goes into making it as responsive and as efficient as possible, because you have so much more flexibility here in what you can do and how you can respond to input events, such as someone has entered a number or clicked a figure or asked for some output. There are good ways to handle that, and there are bad ways to handle that. So it's easy to build an app which is unresponsive. So you have to require, if you're going to be doing a Shiny app, if you're in R, you're going to be doing a Shiny app, spend some time, more than just that 10 minutes, more than a day, spend some time, plan on spending a few days to actually getting in and understanding what some of these concepts are, because it's easy to build something which is not responsive. Now, where do you, and actually here, we'll take a quick look at some of some applications that have been built. Oh, and of course it disconnected because I was not on it. I'm gonna kick these back on, and so we can just look at these real quickly. Let's see if it comes back up for me. Okay, great, yeah. Here, so we can actually take a look at, in this case, this is data of traffic in New York that you can look at for different times. So here you can actually see what different times of day, what the traffic looks like. And if you build it right, it can be nice and quickly interactive. Here's a very nice visualization. The visualizations that you can get out of Shiny can be just like you can get amazing work out of ggplot. Similarly, you can get very customized representations out of Shiny apps. One thing you'll notice, though, that with all these sort of cool interactive apps is they're kind of one page. And with Shiny, it often looks like one page. It requires a little bit more effort to make more of a web page and dashboard more than just a single page. So Shiny is much more around a single presentation of graphs and data sort of interacting. All right, let's talk about how you deploy Shiny. So you have a sense of how you deploy a Streamlit. And remember, with Streamlit, you can deploy pretty much wherever you can run a Python app, but it's easier if you use Streamlit.io or Heroku or one of these other services that are sort of designed to very quickly move you up. In Shiny, it can be very, very simple to deploy once you're set up by going to using RStudio's Shiny server. There is a limit. You can only have 5 applications open at a time, and I think you have a limit of about 20 concurrent users at a time. You can go up to a paid level where you can get more and more. It does go up a little bit steeply, but again, they also do support dashboards for the public good as well. Now, you can use the open source version of Shiny Server, but in that case, what you have to do is, it's not the same thing as in Streamlit, where all you have to do is move Streamlit up there and make sure that things are set up correctly. In this case, you have to run a Shiny server. So a Shiny server is required to be running if you want to roll your own with Shiny. And so that means you've got to set up the server. And even there, you do have some limits as well in the open source version. You can't just scale up it as much as you want. They did lock down some of the versions there. So, and that's kind of it. You can get up to the paid version of Shiny, or you can do and host with them, or you can get an on-prem paid account. So those are the highest levels where you had fallback and you can actually scale up as needed if you have a bunch of users coming all at once. Or you're setting up your own server, or you're using the free Shiny server. And so fewer options than there are with Streamlit. So a question here, you can use Shiny Proxy. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Mark. I was going to mention Shiny Proxy. Shiny Proxy actually combines some of these different capabilities, which gives you some scalability and fallback, and also has a free level as well. So Shiny Proxy is also a good alternative. I'm not aware of other ones, but if anyone knows of any others, please let me know. All right, I'd like to open this up a little bit and to talk now and take questions from you all. I've asked you to think about the things that you would like to deploy. So let's take some time. What are some data science solutions that you are interested in making interactive? Heat map of temperature unit accumulation for a given region. Excellent. So Scott, what language have you been working in to do this modeling to begin with?
I've been using Python.
Python. Okay, great. Have you started to look into different ways of exposing this yet? Have you looked at Streamlit, or have you looked at the Plotly Dash or anything along those lines?
Yes, I have.
And what have you settled on so far?
Still exploring. Plotly is used more within my company, so that's the one that I started my exploration with, but I'm trying to just see what best fits the case that I'm currently working on.
Yeah. And do you have do you have to do you have a large database backend, or is it is it pretty much just the model that you need to expose the output of?
Mostly just the model.
Okay, well, good. So you have a lot more flexibility there. But you're thinking that you will be deploying this on-prem, or are you thinking cloud-based?
Most likely cloud-based.
Oh, so you actually have a lot of options then. So, but you already have experience with Plotly and with are people using Dash there as well? Do you have sort of other folks who are using Dash?
Yes, we are.
Yep. Yeah, a real trade-off there. If you're the only person using a Streamlit, it might be fine, but then you own everything about it. Well, good. Erlica, program evaluation for stakeholders. That's a great one. Tell us a little bit about that. What have you been developing your model in? What language?
I haven't yet. Still thinking about it, but I'm learning today, getting some tools. And so I thought this might be a good way to kind of look and consider how we can do that.
And are you doing development in Python or in R?
Right now, I'm leaning towards Python,
Yeah.
but depending on how well we're able to embed it in our website. So
right.
I guess it really didn't matter either way.
Okay. And how many concurrent users do you think you're going to have for this?
Do you mean how many people will be? Well, I'm not sure.
You would want to be able to interact with it all at the same time.
Yeah, not very many. Not very many unless it's being presented, and asked for others to take a look at the data and kind of explore it. But for the most part, just 1 or 2, 5 people maybe at a time. give
Okay.
that many.
So actually, the free level may actually work then for that. It's one thing to keep in mind, if there's even the possibility that that you're going to have many concurrent users, people trying to pull up the app at the same time, you will want to make sure that you're in one of those tiers that will allow you to pricing tiers, that will allow you to scale up. Excellent.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. Peter, image classifier of tumor histology. What language have you been working in so far?
Just Python.
Great. And if you put some thought into how you want to expose this at all?
So far in building this tool, we've used I guess another group's GUI that was actually developed by a group down in Emory, and it's I guess the concept is it's an interactive annotation tool where in order to increase labeled data, we would have a model where I guess the pathologist or the trained specialist and histologist would select areas of tissue that are considered tumor by clicking these areas that would be considered foreground, and then background would be the negative areas, which would, I guess, be non-tumorous. And with each click, the classifier would predict the next area of tissue was most likely to be tumor.
Oh, that's nice. That's really interactive. That's quite nice. This also sort of brings up an issue that we haven't touched on yet, which is there PHI there? So do you have to be careful about people logging in with credentials to use this?
So what we envision is that that the images would, I guess, be the PHI would not be available, but it would be, I guess, in the cloud. That's how people would be able to access the information, the images, excuse me.
So that is another consideration as well. If you require sign-in, especially if you want this to work well with existing things like single sign-on or things like that, that's where those paid tiers, that's usually something which is kept only for the paid tiers. It's not available in the free tiers. Free tiers is just anybody who can get to the page can get to it. So if it's being served on an intranet, that sort of handles it. But if it is going to be hosted on the web, that's when you might want to start thinking about and budgeting for if you want to have secure login for this. One of the things which is true about Shiny is that it is possible to see all the data which is in that R session. So it's really tough to lock that down so you can't see that data. If you in the back end are only serving up data, piece by piece, that's one way to keep it safe. But know that once it's in that area, then there are ways to get to it. Another one, working on banking fund transfer pricing equilibrium in R with Shiny. So Mark, is this going to be one of those situations where you need to have logins? What does that look like?
Yeah, this is a new work by now. I have the Shiny version of that running by now also.
Great.
But the real issue is when the user wants to use the model, need to change some parameters of the model for testing some ideas, and then for do that need the original data available, and then that is why when Shiny go live, take a picture of the data and stay with that data for the rest of the time. Then we have not the actual data in that moment. I must to ask to the Shiny go for it, and normally that is the trouble. Try to go for all that data and try to testing the new parameters for the model over that new data.
Yep, that's a challenge, and to load up that data in a performant manner, and so people sort of know that it's coming. Yep. One of the nice things that I do like about the sort of our community is that they're very responsive to questions. So if you haven't already, to reach out to see if other people have solved that problem. they tend to really take well-phrased questions seriously.
Yeah, but I
Excellent.
think you are right that normally the Shiny is model focusing environment, then it's more for the model than
Yeah.
for the data, right? That's
Yeah.
true. You're
Yeah,
right.
that's true. And there are ways around, but you just have to work harder at it. Yeah. Great. Let's see. So John, you have clicking on a location on a map and displaying features like crop fields and grain elevators. Well, excellent. Have you tried this out, John? Have you gotten something working? And if so, what in what language?
Oh yeah, I've gotten it to work on BigQuery and Data Studio as a way to display it.
Oh, excellent.
It's using, like, you have to manually enter the lat long, so ideally I'd want to be able to either click on the map itself,
Yeah.
or click on a location that's already loaded in, which is going to be a shapefile or a coordinate, and then update that radius based on the extracting on the click event.
That certainly sounds. Have you started to build on top of that with Python for example, sort of as the glue to sort of query, get the lat, get the lat long from map location and then pulling the data in?
I have not. It's all been just through BigQuery for hosting the data backend, and then Data Studio as the front end.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, great. They're great packages for interacting with BigQuery, of course, in Python, if that's something that you're interested in.
Mm-hmm.
And we have just a few minutes. Shalini, you had a question. Which one do you recommend that are free and quick? You have a presentation for a project to a client next weekend. Streamlit's looking pretty good. That's a very quick way to do it, especially if you can, those instructions. If you can get the invite to get on streamlit.io, that's a very, very fast way to do that, especially if it's for a presentation for a client. You don't need to scale up to a whole bunch of people. If you're not able to get an invite fast enough, then following that link for hosting on Heroku. Do know that with Heroku, in the past, it was a little bit flaky about getting things started up. Sometimes you're running into problems. So if you do that, you probably want to get it started well before the presentation. But that's my thought. So anybody have other ideas about getting a presentation out really quickly? I'm thinking Streamlit. Mubarak, would you agree? Yeah. Okay. And Dr. Bell? Yeah, exactly. Well, we're at the end of the time. Would like to thank you all very much for sharing your ideas and for your questions. We'll have a recording of this available as well. And would like to mention that next week we will have a workshop, which is also going to be highly interactive. We're going to be sharing those packages that we think have been just essential for our work, but we want to hear from you as well. So if you're attending next week, be thinking about the packages. Think about the packages that have changed your life in either R or Python. And we look forward to talking to you next week. All right. Oh, and Leaflet. Yeah, that's a great idea. Leaflet. Very good. All right. See you all later. Take care.